Every fall, some MA plans exit the market or change their coverage, and it's happening again for 2026. But this time it's making headlines, leaving people worried about losing their coverage, losing their doctors, or even their plan altogether. Let's get into what you need to know. Welcome back to another episode of Medicare Happy Hour, the most fun you'll have on the internet while talking about Medicare. Today, I am enjoying a glass of Cabernet. Cheers. So first things first, is this normal? Medicare Advantage plans can and do leave counties, and it happens sometimes annually, but it's not new. However, it's been happening more frequently, and 2026 is expected to bring a lot of exits. You've seen a lot of headlines, I'm sure, over this. One important thing to note here is that if an insurance company sells a certain plan in a county and they choose to exit that county, they are not allowed to enter back into that county for at least 2 years. I've heard it's upwards of 5, but it's at least 2 years that they can't sell another plan in that county. So it really does, the insurance company does have an impact if they choose to make this decision that obviously impacts negatively a lot of you. So why does this happen is the question we get frequently. First and foremost, financial pressures. If you've seen some of our videos, we've talked about, how the insurance companies are being squeezed more tightly than what they've been in the past. And, a lot of people say, well, that's part of the game. So financial pressures, plans may leave if costs are higher than payments they receive from Medicare. Second, rising hospital, drug costs can make certain geographic areas less profitable. We've heard a lot about certain rural areas, etc. I'm sure that you've seen a lot of network disruptions where the insurance company and the hospital system just can't seem to come to an agreement and the hospital falls out of network. That really falls in line with this. Low enrollment. If there's not a lot of people enrolled in the plan, plans may eliminate that product line. They want strong participation to essentially spread out the risk. That's generally the law of large numbers when it comes to insurance, is the more people in the pool, if someone has a ton of claims, then they just spread out that risk among many people. And then regulatory and compliance shifts. CMS, the Center for Medicare, they adjust rules annually, from things like star ratings to new requirements. Do you have to cover dental, vision, hearing, some drug coverage? We have many videos about how the drug coverage has changed starting in 2025 and will continue to change moving forward. And some carriers just frankly can't meet these standards. The star ratings are generally the system that the government comes up with, where if you have the higher star rating, you get more bonus dollars from the government. If you don't have those, then financially a lot of this just isn't going to make sense. All right, generally when talking this much about the government and insurance companies, that's a 2-sip video. So cheers again. When it comes down to why this is happening, looking at the carrier strategy, sometimes these insurance companies, they want to refocus resources on larger markets or areas where they're more competitive. I mentioned the rural areas earlier. If there's less plans available or they're less competitive out there, we are seeing some carriers pull out of those areas. But then they'll double down in more of the urban areas. So why it matters, this is really important. If your plan exits, you'll get a termination letter in September. If you don't do anything, you will be disenrolled from your Medicare Advantage plan for January 1st, and you'll be left only with original Medicare. So no drug coverage, no additional coverage, etc. So the risks there are losing access to your current doctors, higher drug costs, because again, we have other videos about this, but the $2,000 max out of pocket for 2025, and in 2026, it's going to $2,100. That's only applicable if you're on a prescription drug plan. And if you lose your Medicare Advantage plan that included your drug plan in it, you're not going to be eligible for that. So the drug costs, out-of-network bills, etc., frankly, it's just going to create a lot of confusion. It's hard. A lot of these people are struggling with, I got this letter, what do I do now? So what can you do? First and foremost, check your ANOC letter. Make sure this is the packet that you either receive via email or in the mail during September. Like I just said earlier, you should get a termination letter in addition to that if this does apply to you. But it's important to know this. So verify if your plan is exiting. Look at your provider networks and drug formularies. Are the drugs that you take still covered? Because if the prescription's not covered, then again, that 2100 doesn't apply to that prescription. Make sure that your doctors that are important to you, your hospitals that are important to you, are still covered by your plan. We're seeing more network disruptions between the hospital systems and the insurance companies than we've seen in years, and we're seeing them all at the same time. Know your timeline. So AEP, which is in the fall every year from October 15th through December 7th, that applies here. A lot of these people are also eligible for an SEP, a special election period, and sometimes that goes all the way through to December 31st. Your options here are as follows. One, you could switch to another Medicare Advantage plan, assuming there are some in your area. I know in Ohio, where we are, there are a lot of Medicare Advantage plans exiting rural areas, but there are still Medicare Advantage plans available in your counties. So switching to another Medicare Advantage plan is an option. One thing that you do, and we have other videos about what you need to do to be eligible for a supplement or switch to a supplement in a Part D drug plan. But since your Medicare Advantage plan is exiting and you're sort of left on your own, that would qualify for a special election period to enroll in a Medicare supplement. So if that applies to you and that's something that maybe you've been thinking about going back to a supplement, but you couldn't pass medical underwriting, this is your opportunity to do so. Now, keep in mind, those plans work very differently than the way Medicare Advantage plans work, and they can be very expensive. So I'd recommend you check out one of our videos on the difference between those plans. For individuals that are dual eligible, so those that are Medicare and Medicaid eligible, you may qualify for a special needs plan. And, what I'd really recommend here when it comes to those dual special needs plans, if you're curious if this applies to you, give us a call. Those are complicated. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of changes going on when it comes to Medicaid right now. So just give us a call if you're curious if that would apply to you. And really, at the end of the day, don't panic. We can help. We're here. Give us a call. We just want to make sure you're all set.